We hope you enjoyed this production from the Unitarian Universalist Church of Akron. If you would like more information about Unitarian Universalism or our community, please visit us at uuakron.org. The following recording is from the June 14th service titled The Humanist Difference, led by Reverend Temerson. While Unitarian Universalism is influenced by numerous sources, texts, traditions, and ideas, few have had a greater impact over the last 100 years than humanism. But what exactly is humanism? Is it a religion, a philosophy, a worldview? Today we will explore the key ideas and trends in humanism and seek to understand where it may be going in the future and where humanism may be taking Unitarian Universalism.
And our words this morning are from the Reverend William Murray, who is one of the leading voices in contemporary Unitarian Universalist humanism. These are the days that have been given to us. Let us rejoice and be glad in them. These are the days of our living. Let us live them well in love and service. These are the days of mystery and wonder. Let us cherish and celebrate them with gratitude. These are the days that have been given to us. Let us make them stories worth telling to those who come after us. Today's theme is humanism. Looks like we got some of the humanists to church today. Nicely done. Nicely done. I'm not looking at anybody in particular, so good. Well, I look forward to sharing some thoughts with you about humanism, and particularly about humanism's extraordinary contributions and ongoing contributions to our Unitarian Universalist faith. Before I do that, I want to share some words with you from two very famous and well-known Unitarian Universalist humanists. Our first reading comes from the Reverend John Dietrich, who was a minister in the first half of the 20th century. And in many ways, he was probably fair to say he was sort of the first Unitarian Universalist humanist minister. And his sermons and writings, perhaps more than any others, helped bring humanism into Unitarian Universalism. Or at the time, of course, would have been just Unitarianism. This was long before the two traditions merged into one in 1961. So here are some words from John Dietrich. By religion, I mean the knowledge of man and the duties towards him. That is humanism. It does not deny the right to believe in God, but it places faith in man, in knowledge of man, and our duties toward one another first. It is principally a shifting of emphasis in religion from God to man. It makes the prime task of religion the contemplation of the conditions of human life, the reverence for the worth of human life, and the entering into the world in order that by human effort, life may be improved. John Dietrich, Unitarian minister. Our second reading comes from another Unitarian Universalist humanist. This is the Reverend William Murray. Reverend Murray is an active Unitarian Universalist minister, a writer, chaplain. He's had a wonderful career, and he's still around and still out there speaking and sharing his words of wisdom about humanism and Unitarian Universalism. These are some words that actually I got off of a UU Humanist blog that he entered. He wrote up a few months ago, and I thought it was really, really well said. A few years ago, the so-called new atheists made headlines attacking belief in God and questioning the value of religion. Some of the books by these folks, Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and Daniel Dennett and the late Christopher Hitchens, even made bestseller lists. There is much to commend to these works. They have managed quite well to tear down the edifice of traditional supernatural religious belief, but they have failed to offer anything to take its place. Humanism, however, offers a positive and affirming view of life without a supernatural God. I believe it is not enough to be critical of traditional religion and religious belief unless you can offer something to replace them. This is the difference between atheism, which is negative, and humanism, which is positive and affirming. Atheism means denying the existence of a supernatural deity, but we human beings seek meaning and purpose, and we want to know how to live happy and fulfilling lives. Humanism offers those things, so I talk and write about what humanism affirms, not what it denies, about humanism as a morally responsible and joyous way of living. A positive humanism is not primarily about the supernatural beliefs we reject. It is about the values we stand for. And we stand for human well-being and human flourishing. We stand for social justice and equity for all people. For these affect the quality of life of everyone. Humanism is about the worth and dignity of every human being. It is about respecting persons and caring about each person's well-being. And it is opposed to whatever decreases the flourishing of any human being anywhere at any time. Words from William Murray. Well, welcome everyone. It's really good to see you. Thanks for coming today. So it's been too long, I'm sorry to say, since I've preached a sermon about humanism. I actually went and looked it up earlier this week, and it's been almost 4 years. So for all you humanists, sorry about that. I haven't been avoiding the subject. I really love this topic. So, but as I was looking back on the service 4 years ago, I was reading back on what I said that day. And some of you may or may not remember that day I had the privilege of sharing a pulpit with our own Susan Davis. Raise your hand, Susan, please. I'm sorry, but I already warned you. I'm going to say some nice things about you this morning, so just get ready for that. Now, for those of you who are new to our congregation, Susan is the leader of the Ethical Humanist Society of Northeast Ohio, which meets here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Akron. The meetings are every month. Is the next meeting next week? Or 2 weeks from now? Or 2 weeks from now? I really encourage anyone to attend these meetings. The discussions are wide-ranging and free-flowing, and all are welcome. You don't have to be a humanist. You don't have to be anything. Just show up and have a good conversation. So I had a chance as I was preparing for today's service to reread what Susan said 4 years ago. And that reflection was really, really wonderful. And it speaks to everything that is good and important about humanism. Susan began by affirming that she is a non-theist, meaning that she doesn't believe in a God or any kind of supernatural being. Susan then spoke of her commitment to the values that are at the heart of humanism. Respect for the dignity and worth of all people, a commitment to justice and human betterment in this world and in this life, a deep appreciation for the natural world and the interdependent web, and a celebration of the free and open mind. And Susan also affirmed her deep-seated respect for people of different faiths and backgrounds, which she embodies so well through her extraordinary work with the Akron Area Interfaith Council. Thanks to Susan's commitment and dedication, diverse faith communities in Akron are coming together to combat hunger and to build interfaith understanding. You should really take a look at what Susan wrote. It's quite wonderful. It's on our website. You have to scroll down a ways because it was a few years back. The date was July the 10th, 2011. You should go on there and take a look at it. And in the meantime, I just want to say to Susan, man, thank you so much for your leadership and your vision. I'm going to tell all of you a little bit more about humanism and its important and very positive relationship with Unitarian Universalism, but I just want to say at the outset and to Susan that as far as I'm concerned, there are a few Unitarian Universalist humanists who have lived their values and their principles with more courage and honesty and goodwill than our own Susan Davis. Can we give Susan a round of applause? Okay, now that I have finished my nomination speech for Susan's induction into the Humanism Hall of Fame, let me tell you a little bit about humanism, how it got started, and the role it has played and continues to play in Unitarian Universalism. And let's begin with that name itself. As you heard from our readings, while many religions and belief systems place their ultimate faith in a supernatural being and consider belief in a god or gods to be the meaning and purpose of existence, humanism places its faith in you and me, in our welfare and well-being, and in the possibility that human beings can work together to build a world in which all people are valued and all people are liberated from those structures and barriers that prevent them from living into the fullness of their potential and their humanity. As you heard in John Dietrich's reading earlier, humanism is about contemplation of the conditions of human life, reverence for the worth of human life, and entering into the world in order that by human effort, life may be improved. That's humanism. Now, one question that frequently gets asked about humanism is, well, what exactly is it? Is it a philosophy? Is it a religion? Is it a way of life? Or what is it? And the answer, I think, depends on which humanist you ask. For some, humanism is a religion, although not in the way religion is typically understood. And I'm going to say quite a bit more about that when I talk about the connection between humanism and Unitarian Universalism. Now, for other humanists, humanism is entirely secular and can, in fact, be seen as standing in opposition to religion. Perhaps the best way to understand the entire humanist tradition is to see it as a set of ethical values leading to a way of life that affirms and celebrates human dignity, the free mind, the use of reason, and peace and justice for all people and for the planet. Now, those of you who are Unitarian Universalists may be wondering by now, every time Tim defines humanism or lists its core beliefs and values, they sound an awful lot like Unitarian Universalism. And that's true. You're right about that. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that during the course of the last century or so, Unitarian Universalism has evolved into a very humanistic religion, and that we share many of the same core values and principles as humanism. Now, before turning to that relationship between the two, humanism and UU, let me tell you a little bit about how humanism got started. Whoops, I think I flipped the wrong page. Let me tell you a little bit about the origins of humanism itself. Sorry about that. While it's impossible to point to a single moment when humanism began, or a single individual who can be called the founder of humanism, at least I'm not sure who that is, I think it's fair to say that humanism traces its roots back hundreds, if not thousands of years, perhaps all the way back to the ancient Greeks and Romans, but more recently to the Renaissance and certainly to the Enlightenment. And those roots reveal a growing confidence in the use of reason to understand ourselves and the world around us. And at roughly the same time, there emerged a deepening appreciation for the beauty, the grandeur, and the possibilities of humanity itself, in contrast to the image of a depraved, sinful, fallen human nature found in many religions, including and especially some theological perspectives within Christianity. For the emerging set of ideas that became humanism, life was to be explored, celebrated, and seen as an invitation to make things better in this world rather than waiting for salvation in the next. It was this constellation of ideas that formed the backbone of what came to be known as humanism. But it wasn't until Charles Darwin revolutionized the way we understand the origins of life itself that the distinct philosophy of religion or way of life known as humanism, that's when it really came into being. You will recall that Darwin showed that contrary to previous explanations of creation, which relied on a supernatural God as revealed in sacred texts like the Bible, life evolves or emerges out of purely natural processes. So rather than seeing humankind as being created in the divine image of a god or the gods, Darwin demonstrated that life is self-created and self-existing, and that humanity is part of that long evolutionary process out of which all life emerged. Needless to say, when the Darwinian revolution came, a whole new way of looking at not only the origins of life, but also at the nature and meaning of existence itself took place. Age-old assumptions about ultimate reality, about texts like the Bible, and about religion were challenged. Did it make sense to speak of a supernatural God, or any God, now that life had been shown to be the result of processes that did not necessarily require a creator? The answer for a growing number of thinkers and skeptics was no. And out of that skepticism about traditional answers to ultimate questions came the movement we today call humanism. Now, given the fact that Unitarian Universalism had for pretty much all of its history been a dissenting faith within Christianity that already embraced things like the use of reason and freedom of conscience in religious life, it's really not that surprising that our faith tradition found a close kinship with humanism. The work of those famous Unitarian cultural and philosophical critics, the Transcendentalists, echoed many key themes in the emerging humanism of the day, including freedom of thought, personal authenticity and self-discovery rather than conformity to creeds and dogma, and a very positive, and one might say exalted view of the possibilities of humankind's moral and ethical development. But it wasn't until the first few decades of the 20th century that the Unitarian side of our tradition began to truly embrace humanism. It was the leadership of ministers like the one you heard before, John Dietrich, that led a growing number of Unitarians and a few Universalists to look to the ethics and ideals of humanism as a source of truth and wisdom. Half of those who signed the most important statement of humanist values ever written, the Humanist Manifesto, which was written and published in 1933, half of the signers of that were Unitarians. And as time went on, Unitarian Universalism came to embrace not only many of the core values of humanism, but also what one might call humanism's approach to religion itself. And it is that approach to religion that is, in my view, humanism's most important and lasting contribution to our faith. And I want to take a few minutes to talk about that. Let's think for a moment about this word religion. If you were asked to define or describe the essential elements or components of a religion, what would they be? A creed, maybe? Belief or faith in a God, a supernatural being? Perhaps acceptance of the absolute truth of a sacred text like the Bible or maybe the Quran. Religion, in this view, is ultimately about faith and belief. Belief in the absolute and unquestionable truth found in the creeds and dogmas and sacred texts of a particular religious tradition. But then along came people like Emerson and John Dietrich and another great thinker and leader named Felix Adler, somebody I know Susan looks to for great wisdom. Felix Adler, who founded a humanist movement called ethical culture. And what these visionaries and others like them argued is that while religion can be about creeds and belief in a supernatural being, it doesn't have to be. Religion doesn't have to be about creeds, dogmas, and belief in a supernatural being. Rather, religion can instead be about how we live and the ethical values we affirm. In other words, religion can be an affirmation of how we choose to live in the world rather than what we believe about God or ultimate reality. Another way of saying that is to see religion as being primarily about ethics and values, or how we live, rather than being about a single theology or doctrine, what we believe. And I have to say, this is the way, oftentimes when I'm at a newcomer circle, like the one we'll have later today, that sort of a simple and quick and easy way that I explain what distinguishes Unitarian Universalism. Because it is this conception of religion that has come to define our faith. Think for a moment about our 7 Unitarian Universalist principles, and they're in that hymnal if you're not familiar with them near the front. Rather than being a creed or doctrine about God or ultimate reality that one is required to accept in order to be part of this faith tradition or this church community, those principles are ethical statements about how we choose to journey together and the kind of world we seek to build. They affirm beautiful values like justice and equity and compassion, acceptance of one another, the democratic process, the dignity and worth of all people, and respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we most assuredly are a part. In similar fashion, consider the opening words of our unison affirmation, which we recited just a few minutes ago. Rather than asking you to accept a creedal statement about the nature of God, it affirms a beautiful set of ethical ideals: love, the quest or search for truth, and service to one another and the world. Now, of course, this very ethical approach to religion has its critics and leads many to dismiss Unitarian Universalism for being, theologically weak, empty, religion light, or not a religion at all. That's that religion where you can believe whatever the heck you want. I have to say that I couldn't disagree more with those who make this criticism. You see, rather than offering a creed which you must affirm in order to be accepted, or which can be used to reject and demean you, we offer unconditional love and welcome to all souls. We invite those who choose to join us to live their lives according to a set of principles that we believe will enrich our lives and make the world a better place. I'm sorry, there isn't anything weak or mushy about that. And as a minister in this faith tradition, I can tell you from firsthand experience that our approach to religion, it saves lives by offering a spiritual home to those who have been told by other traditions that because of who they are, what they believe or don't believe, or who they love, that they are less than, that they are unworthy, and that they are not welcome. This open-minded and welcoming spirit that's at the heart of our faith, that is at the heart of our approach to religion, so much of this is what humanism has bequeathed to Unitarian Universalism, and we are so much the better for it. So much the better for it. Have you ever thought about, I'm going to go off my script for a minute, have you ever thought about if you actually tried as best you can to live Unitarian Universalist principles and values? It's hard. I struggle to honor the dignity and worth of all people almost every day. I'm challenged to live with justice and compassion in all of my relationships. There's nothing weak or simple. This is a tough, challenging religion. But what makes it tough and challenging is what it calls us to do and how it calls us to live and be with others in the world. And I believe with all my heart that if we can live those values and if we can share them with the world, man, the world would look like a much, much better place. So I want to now leap ahead a little bit and bring Unitarian Universalism and humanism's relationship up to the present day and talk a little bit about where that relationship may be taking us in the future. And I want to do this because in the last few years, maybe even the last few decades, the relationship has gotten a little tense. It's become a source of some disagreement and discomfort and conflict within Unitarian Universalism. And let me tell you a little bit about that. Now, one of the great benefits of Unitarian Universalism's embrace of humanism's emphasis on shared ethics and values rather than a single theology or a required belief in God has been that it has created within Unitarian Universalism great theological diversity and variety. And you experience that in almost every Unitarian Universalist congregation you walk into, including this one. As I often tell newcomers to our congregation, gosh, I guess I'm giving away all my good lines for newcomer circles this morning. As I often tell newcomers, on any given Sunday morning in our congregation or almost any other UU congregation, you will find people who believe in God or gods, people who don't believe in any God, and many people who aren't sure, are open to the possibility, don't know yet. Still searching, still questioning, still figuring things out. And as I said before, while our critics see this theological diversity as a fatal flaw and a glaring weakness, we Unitarian Universalists have come to see it as an enormous gift and as an opportunity to listen and learn and grow together. But embracing theological pluralism and diversity has presented us with some challenges. And among the most serious of those challenges has been a growing chorus of objections from some Unitarian Universalist humanists, and I emphasize some, about our willingness to recognize and speak openly to that theological pluralism and diversity within our congregations, from the pulpit, in the way we run our worship services, and so on. You see, while humanism affirms ethical values that are nearly identical to those of Unitarian Universalism, it also expresses a consistently non-theistic perspective, as well as a deep skepticism about things like, words like spirituality and mysticism. And this skepticism has led some UU humanist critics to focus their attention on things like, what words and practices we should or shouldn't be saying in church on Sunday morning. Is it okay to say the word God? Is it okay to use words like divine or the holy? Should Unitarian Universalists pray? What about ritual? Isn't that too much like those other guys? So rather than embracing and celebrating the theological pluralism and diversity that humanism itself paved the way for within our faith tradition, UU humanism has at times cast what I feel has been a judging eye on those Unitarian Universalists who believe in God and who are hungry for spiritual depth and meaning. And this focus on what we can or cannot say or do on Sunday mornings has, in my view, led many Unitarian Universalist congregations to waste precious time and energy on disputes about religious language and practice, rather than getting to the point of humanism, which is to live life in the present and to make the world a better place. That's what humanism is ultimately about, not about what words we say in church. At least that's my view, and so I know some of you undoubtedly don't agree with that. But humanism is about human betterment. It's about human flourishing. It's about the unleashing human personality, as Dr. King used to like to say, to helping people live into the fullness and into their potential. That's what humanism is about. Now, the good news is that I believe humanism and Unitarian Universalism are beginning, there are always steps forward and back, beginning to outgrow this, what I would call kind of more restrictive and, I don't know what the word is, anti-spiritual or anti-God phase, and are moving into an era of genuine pluralism, openness, and courageous dedication to the values at the heart of both. Unitarian Universalist humanists like William Murray, who you heard from earlier, are articulating a vision of humanism that recognizes the importance of things like spiritual growth and experience. Murray's got a wonderful book out. He was published, 6 or 8 years ago, which I really recommend to you, called About Religious Humanism, or he sometimes calls it religious naturalism, called Reason and Reverence. And the book makes the argument that the two fit nicely within humanism. And in that book, and in the words you heard earlier, Murray calls for a positive humanism that affirms the ethical values at the heart of humanism and Unitarian Universalism, but that is also open to spirituality and spiritual and mystical experiences. They don't necessarily affirm that we all believe in God, but rather recognize that human beings are hungry for awe and wonder and reverence. Not necessarily to some guy with a gray beard up in heaven, wherever that is, but rather the reverence that comes from gazing up at a starry night, watching a beautiful sunset, being in a loving community. That's spiritual. That's mystical. And Murray says, yeah, and that can be part of humanism. Why not? That's the kind of humanism Unitarian Universalism needs as we move into the future. A humanism that is open-minded and open-hearted. A humanism that works for a world of justice and compassion for all people. A humanism that celebrates pluralism and diversity. A humanism that, well, okay, I'm going to do it again, follows the lead of people like Susan Davis, who honors and welcomes those with different beliefs than our own, and who extends a hand of sisterhood to all people of faith. That spirit and those values are the essence of both Unitarian Universalism and humanism, and it is our calling, I believe, to live those values as we journey together to build a world in which all people are free and empowered and invited and encouraged to flourish, to grow, to be part of this beautiful, beautiful world, this beautiful, beautiful planet that we call home. That's the calling of humanism. That's the calling of Unitarian Universalism. Let's get to work. So, thank you very much for listening, and blessed be.
We thank you again and encourage you to seek us out at uuakron.org.